like to great, great. There's the recording. Thank you, Alejandra. Anyway, the title of our webinar today is Ethics and Boundaries and Peer Support with Dyany Munson, and I'm going to turn it over to Dyany. Here you go, Dyany. Thanks.
Thank you, Mary. It's great to be here again. This is a topic that is near and dear to my heart. I have been working in peer support for 7 years now, and I have been actually training certification of peer support for about 4 years. And I really do like a lot of interaction. I find that to be more helpful for everybody. So I'm just prepping you guys that we're going to have a lot of time that if there's not a lot of answers, we're going to be playing silence chicken. So, because I'm not going to talk if I ask you guys a question you need to respond to, but use the Q&A for it. And I'm asking you, don't clutter the Q&A because I also have ADHD and that won't help us, any of us. So, let's get going on the actual webinar. So ethics and boundaries in peer support, I find that in peer support especially, but it really applies to all behavioral health fields. And when I say peer support, I mean all peer providers, recovery coaches, family support, youth support, peer support, all of those things. Really, but also all behavioral health, it needs a lot of boundaries, and they're really closely tied to ethics. But I find that they serve a threefold purpose in that it's important for ethics that we have boundaries, but it's also important for our own self-care and our own well-being or our own wellness to have boundaries, but it's also important for those that we serve. And as some things to keep in mind as we go forward throughout this. So the objectives of this course, we're going to define some common terminology, review the peer support code of ethics and professional conduct, and we're going to learn why healthy boundaries are the core of ethical and professional conduct. We're going to learn some tips and tricks to help the peer support workforce better understand and implement boundaries with peers and in the workplace. Like I just mentioned, the purpose of boundaries and peer support, there's self-care. You have a better work-life balance. It protects us from responsibilities that are not ours. I know that the peer support, especially, it attracts, we are attracted to this kind of field because we want to help. And that's not a bad thing, but it can quickly become a bad thing if it has been a maladaptive coping skill for us in the past. And sometimes we have a tendency to take on responsibilities that are not ours. So self-care, it also protects us from burnout, which is everybody in behavioral health is subject to this because it attracts the helpers. And but I have found that people that enact really strong, healthy boundaries on all levels, which we're going to go into, have a much lower incidence of burnout. And it maintains and builds our recovery. As peer providers, our recovery is a core part of what we are there for and what we need to do our jobs. And so maintaining and building our recovery is just really important. It's also part of our code of ethics. It's also very valuable for peer growth, including empowerment. It's more strengths-based. It's focused on what they can do and not what they can't do. If we're feeling the need to jump in and fix things, then we're not strengths-based. We're seeing what they can't do. It allows the building and encourages the building of skills, confidence, and responsibility, which are all essential for true recovery. And sorry, I thought I silenced that, and apparently I didn't. And it encourages finding of appropriate resources, and such as when we have really good boundaries and stay in our lane, an individual will find the resources more appropriate for the specific needs that they have. It empowers individuals to make positive changes in their lives. When a person is surrounded by people who do things for them, there's no motivation, and they're disempowered from making positive changes. They don't need to. Other people are going to take care of it, especially if they leave it long enough. And when it comes to ethics, it better supports confidentiality. It keeps us in our lane. It supports the peer supporters recovery as we back to self-care, but that's also part of our code of ethics. And it reduces legal liability and increases ethical compliance. It's just good for us all the way around. Now, something that I developed as I worked in peer support and as I taught peer support is I divided boundaries into types, which really helps me to implement them better. To define them, internal boundaries are boundaries you set and keep for yourself regarding your own feelings and actions for or about yourself. It might be like an internal, and then I divide them into emotional and physical. Emotional involves our feelings, which we can't always control, but we can make choices that influence those. And then physical are actions that we actually do. So an internal emotional boundary, for instance, might include, I'm not going to beat myself up if I fail when I'm new at something I'm trying to add to my toolbox, or something new that I'm trying to do, whether it's a skill for work or a hobby. I'm going to give myself grace when I try something new and not beat myself up. And that produces emotional wellness that way. So external boundaries are those you set for and enforce regarding the actions and of others and our feelings about others. So internal or an external emotional boundary, I'm not going to feel responsible for somebody else's choices or somebody else's mood. I'm not going to feel responsible for that. I'll feel responsible for my actions, and I can recognize, oh, I might have been able to say that a little bit differently, but I'm not going to jump to fix things because I feel responsible for them. And we want to remember all of these because we're going to use them in the coming slides. To touch on physical, internal physical might be, I am going to set a rule for myself that I'm only going to watch 2 episodes of this show per day. Otherwise, because I don't know about you guys, but I think a lot of us, we have a tendency to, when things are a little bit hard, sometimes it's easy to check out. And sometimes that's through video games, sometimes it's through our phone, doom scrolling on social media. Sometimes it's through TV shows or, Netflix binges, but we'll do it to the point that we hurt ourselves because we might stay up till 2 a.m. watching something when there's things we don't want to deal with the next day. In which case, an internal physical boundary will be, I'm only going to watch 2 episodes because I know if I cut myself off after 2, then I'll be better able to make decisions that, like going to bed at a decent time so I get enough sleep for what I have to do tomorrow. Things like that really help support us and our wellness. External emotional, we went over that, but external physical will be, I'm not going to jump in and lend someone money or try to save someone from the consequences of their own choices. And that ties to the external emotional. If I don't feel responsible, then it's easier for me to not jump in and try to take away their power in a situation by cleaning up the consequences, because I can't stand to see them struggle. But struggle is a lot how we learn. And I can see there's a lot of stuff in the chat. I'm trying to stay out of the chat because it tends to be really distracting. But if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A, and I will. I have that up, and I'll be able to do that pretty quickly. So breaking down the code of ethics in terms of boundaries. So we're going to be focusing on the peer support code of ethics and professional conduct for this presentation. But this applies to enough of us. I mean, I had looked over the family support and other code of ethics that are out there, and there's enough similarities. This should apply to everybody. So hopefully you'll be able to take what you've learned here and apply it to the few differences that happen in your code of ethics if you work in another peer provider role. We're not going to cover every item in our code of ethics, but we're going to cover most of them. I will present a scenario for each item. I'm going to present some scenarios, and they're going to have multiple possible code of ethics implications. So then we're going to discuss how boundaries can best be used or misused in the situation provided, and how that ties to ethical compliance and what types of boundaries, internal, external, physical, or emotional, would help the most in that situation, and how one type of boundary might affect another. How an emotional boundary, for instance, might affect a physical boundary. So you were sent a link before the class to the current peer support code of ethics and professional conduct. I highly recommend having that ready and able, whether it's popped up or you have it printed out to answer questions during the presentation. I tend to print it out myself. That makes it easier. And Mary, did you have something?
I just wanted to say that I put the link for it in the chat for everyone, so you can go ahead and click on that link and bring it up on your computer also.
Thank you, Mary. So yes, there's a lot of good things we can do that. So we're going to get going. So the scenario one, we have a certified peer support specialist, Tim, has a really good rapport with his peer named John, and John doesn't have a lot of natural support. So Tim sometimes gives John rides outside of their session times, just for emergencies and stuff, just for real needs. And they have long conversations that are sometimes about some of Tim's struggles. So my questions, what code of ethics are being violated in this scenario? And please put it in the Q&A. Dual relationship? Yeah, absolutely. Dual relationship will be he's both the taxi service or a friend and peer support. That's not okay. What else? What else we got? Okay, let's specifically go with the code of ethics. I know that this is blurred out, but the state code of ethics. You can give me a letter and we can read it out. Using peer as a therapist, possibly. There's not a lot of evidence of that. They do have long conversations, but that's not necessarily, because we have long conversations with our peers when we're within our lane as well. So we don't have evidence of that at this point. And Sam, I understand you got, the primary responsibility is to help those they serve achieve self-directed recovery. But which code of ethics? If you want to look at dual relationships, that's J on the current code of ethics. So some people say O. remain aware of their skills and limitations, and do not provide services or represent themselves as experts in areas which they do not have sufficient knowledge or expertise. I would not necessarily say that, because what he is providing is a ride, which he is sufficient knowledge or expertise. I would say that bumps more into dual relationships, but it's good that you guys are being aware of that, and that's good. And somebody said E, which is maintain high standards of personal conduct and conduct themselves in a manner that fosters their own recovery. Absolutely, Jesse. I would definitely say that one, in that that it doesn't foster his own recovery if he is using his own peer, possibly as a therapist there, and that's not using himself as a therapist. He might be using his peer, trying to use his peer as a therapist, talking a lot about Tim's struggles, not as a sharing lived experience thing, but more as a, oh, let me get this off my chest kind of thing, which is not appropriate in our role. And yeah, there's a lot of things there. Yeah, maintaining high standards of personal conduct, absolutely. And that fosters his recovery, absolutely. Because a lot of times, I don't know about you guys, but there's a lot of times it's like, oh, I can do this. It wouldn't hurt me at all. And my days of less wellness was full of, oh, I can do this and it won't hurt me activities, right? I don't know about you guys, but that's totally something. I got A and B, absolutely seek to role model recovery. He's not role modeling recovery when he doesn't do good items there. And B, respect the rights and dignity of those they serve. The only thing I think that may be possible there is if we are seeing, is it respectful to say, oh, you're right, you can't get other rights, and I'm just going to enable you here because I see your limitations, right? And so that's not really respectful of his power. Somebody said, M, ensure that all information and documents provided is true and accurate. That is a definite possibility, because I can almost guarantee that he's not documenting the extra ride time at all with his agency. Absolutely. Somebody said, N, keep current with emergent knowledge relevant to recovery and open. I wouldn't really say that one here, because it doesn't, he's not really, it doesn't have anything to do with him remaining relevant quite yet. Unwarranted promises of benefits towards those they serve, possibly. It does set the idea that this is part of peer services role, and that's an unwarranted benefit. This is not part of our role to give them, to be a taxi out of working session time, right? And I mean, even during working session time, we should never be there just to give them a ride, ever. So if you give a peer a ride to an appointment that involves their mental health treatment, is that so anytime you say, I'm giving them a ride, you got to question your boundaries there. That is a very good question, because this is a challenge a lot of us have. So what I will tell you to ask yourself is, what support do they need? We are there for emotional support. We are not there to train, that's CBRS. We are not there to link them to services, that's case management. But if they need emotional support while they do something, then connecting them to that thing that they need support during is appropriate. So if now you may run into double billing scenarios, and you need to talk to your agency about that. But if it is approved that they have some support from you while they talk to, for instance, their med manager, I would absolutely not recommend it during a counseling session. That's almost completely a double billing situation. But sometimes if it's a physical health provider that may be providing med management, and if it's okayed by your agency and they need emotional support while they do that, run it by your agency. That's not necessarily a dual relationship. If you're just giving them a ride, that is a dual relationship. Does that make sense? You see the thing. So Rebecca, I see that primary. So this is an overall arching goal for us as peer providers, is to help them achieve self-directed recovery. Is this an overarching goal, but it doesn't, it's not a list of the musts. Let's keep the violations under the must, but I would say we want the under the must with the letters. Those are specifically what we're looking at, what they're violating. But you're right. By violating any of the musts, we violate the primary responsibility, right? Because he's not going to achieve self-directed recovery if his peer provider is always bailing him out and getting him a ride, for instance, right? And he's not going to have the strength and ability to learn and grow because the peer provider here doesn't really believe that. Otherwise, he wouldn't be swooping in, right? He doesn't have the ability to get the natural supports or find other rides. I don't believe that, so I'm going to swoop in. So yes, that is a core violation, and he's taken away the learning opportunity, and he's not believing in him. So it does violate that, but I like to focus specifically on the letters when I talk about the violations. But that was a really good point, Rebecca. I'm looking at Cindy's comment. She said emotional support for community business and understand what is being said to them and to help them feel comfortable in the meeting. So helping them feel comfortable, yes. Explaining things to them, that is more of a case management or sometimes CBRS role. If the individual has trouble understanding, that's not really emotional support. That's a different barrier that they're running into. Does that make sense? If we're explaining everything to them, do we believe that they can have self-directed recovery, or do we believe they need help? Usually we believe they need help and they can't do it on their own, right? And so that's not really supportable as our role in peer support. If we're in another role, sure. And that's one of the things about finding the resources that they need at that time. But as much self-directed recovery, that includes self-advocating, which means being able to understand and think for themselves. Now, that can have a few gray areas if something comes up and it's just one little phrase here or there. But if we're acting like a translator or explainer of everything, we are overstepping our boundaries. Absolutely. So excellent, you guys, excellent work. So let us, if I can get my, come on, technical. Okay. So what damage is possible from the ethical violations in this scenario? And who gets hurt and how? Yeah, in family support, the caregiver is not in recovery, right? But the caregiver is, yeah, and even then, the child may not be completely in recovery. They might be in some of the earlier stages of recovery, but yeah, and explain the yes system to them. Absolutely, that is a really good distinction. Thank you, Stephanie. John can be damaged by becoming dependent on Tim. Absolutely. That's the number one thing. Great catch, Mariah. That is absolutely anonymous. Burnout and spending own money is going to end in stress. Absolutely. You will have burnout if you're doing this, because then you feel more obligated. You feel that emotional responsibility, and that leads to bad actions. And yeah, it's spending his money on his own gas, and gas ain't cheap these days, right? And both, and I assume you mean both the peer supporter and the peer support's going to get burned out, setting up the client, the peer, to think that the peer support is something that it isn't. Have you guys, so there is so it has, yes, it has potential to hurt both parties, both burnout on one side and dependence on the other. Yeah, they could think they set expectations. You think they could give right each time, then her, or you don't. And that covers the unwarranted promises that somebody brought up earlier. Yeah, and Tim isn't getting paid for the time, and he's too involved with John. And could that lead to, well, and John, it seems to be doing really well. He wants to end services, but I really need to meet with him, so I don't want to discharge him just yet. Absolutely, we got a lot of stuff that can hurt both individuals here. Excellent. You guys are doing excellent. So what types of boundaries, internal, external, physical, emotional, would help Tim avoid the ethical violations? Oh, yeah, that's a good one. That it could also hurt the company, and there's liability if there's an accident when driving around off hours. Absolutely. I mean, it would be on Tim's personal insurance, but it's going to get back to the company. And again, it would hurt Tim because you can bet your sweet Bippy that he has a good chance of getting fired for that. That's a good catch, Cameron. Internal and physical. How, Jesse? Can you give me more information on that? Emotional. Lucia, excellent. Do not feel responsible. He is not responsible for getting John anywhere. That is not part of his role, right? And he's also an emotional boundary of, well, John can't do it, and that is clear violation of our ethics, right? Great catch, Lucia. Loretta, company concerns and preset standards of conduct. Yeah, we got that. It's the code of ethics and professional conduct. We got a lot of things there. Absolutely, Loretta. And Katie, setting up expectations from the very beginning of your role and what you're willing to do and allowed to do within the realm of your role. Yeah, it definitely does that. There's a term that I use in training and in work in general, and that is bad boundary Betty. I also call them bad boundary Bobs. And that's somebody in any position. And it's the kind of thing that I don't know if any of you have ever worked in a position with somebody after they've had a bad boundary Betty. It doesn't necessarily have to have been a peer provider. It could be a case manager, counselor, anything like this that sets up expectations that hurt every provider after that. I have had to do this a few times, and it's really challenging. Yeah, Devin, there's confusion of relationships. So what types of boundaries would help Tim avoid that confusion of relationship? So yeah, we have some external, and Joy, I love that, setting the boundaries right from the start. That is really essential. One of the things about boundaries that makes them more powerful is if we can set them from the beginning. These are my work hours. I won't answer the phone after work hours. These are my this is, this, I don't give rides, I don't do these things. Then when it comes up, it's not personal. And we don't have to set that, oh no, I didn't say that I wasn't going to do this. Now I feel obligated to do this. So setting those right from the start really helps with boundaries. Excellent catch, Joy. Yeah. And Zara, it's going to set expectation that other peer supports will do the same. So external and internal, but what specific external and internal boundaries? Lucia, I like that personal, physical boundary of my time and my personal belongings. And that could be my car. He's not letting him drive the car, but he's giving him basically the use of his car by giving him a ride. And this is my time and my gas and the wear on my car. And absolutely, those are some things like that. So great stuff here. We got internal. I'm not going to feel responsible. I'm going to know that I am not responsible for his lack of supports. I'm not responsible for him getting someplace One of the things I teach a lot is never, never, never let your peers' goals become your goals. And the reason I say that is we are there to support the peer while they work on their goals, not us. Otherwise, if we have their goals become our goals, oh, they wanted to do this, I really want to help them get there, then are we going to feel more tempted to, I'll just nudge this a little, I'll just put some reminders, I'll just do some suggestions, I'll just do these little boundary slippages and help them make decisions and give them some advice. That's a lack of support. Absolutely, Stephanie, lack of support for encouraging more independence. We support, and just by supporting without swooping in, we want to stay off the sofa. We don't want to make suggestions, give opinions, feedback, or advice. We support. We support. And when we do that, just the act of doing that is already a vote of confidence that they can do it or find appropriate resources to do it themselves. And that's huge. That is absolutely huge. If every time you do something for somebody, even if it's figuring out solutions for them, even if you don't plan on enacting them, you are telling them, I don't think you can do this. Support is what we're here for. Yep, Cindy, not to demand or expect them to do something that they really don't want to do, or maybe aren't capable of doing at this point in their recovery. That's okay. There's a lot of times, I'm sure some of you have seen this, when the goals they originally set with us aren't really what they want to do. They're what they feel they should do. Other people have told them, or they felt pressure. Maybe they wanted to do it. Maybe it's something that's bigger than where they are capable of being right now. That's okay. When we support them wherever they are, it doesn't matter. They will start to recognize, maybe I don't want that. Well, okay, well, what do you want? And then they can find motivation, because that internal motivation is way more powerful than anybody shooting them or saying, oh, well, let me fix this for you, or let me give you some solutions, or let me tell you what to do. Stay off that sofa. We are there to support, and that's very valuable. Never underestimate the power of it. Excellent. You guys are doing great. So let's go to scenario number 2. So we have another peer supporter. Sally has a peer named Jane with a physical disability that limits her mobility. Sally doesn't have a lot of physical strength, but she pushes herself to help Jane get in and out of Sally's car, as well as get Jane's wheelchair loaded into the trunk. Jane seems really thankful, so Sally knows she can't let Jane down by showing any reluctance or weakness. Sally knows Jane relies on Sally's help and feels successful when she is able to get Jane where she wants to go. So first question again, which code of ethics are being violated in this scenario? B, respect the rights and dignity of those they serve. Absolutely. You're not seeing what they're capable of when you're swooping in, right? O, remain aware of their skills and limitations. Do not provide services or represent themselves as expert in areas for which they do not have sufficient knowledge or expertise. Absolutely. It is so easy to hurt yourself and not know good ways to transfer a person. You're not trained for that purpose work, because that's not our job. That's not our role, right? Yeah, we'll get to the physical and emotional in a little bit, Shauna. Excellent. Anything else we got here? Yeah, we got we covered remained aware of their skills and limitations, because it's also Sally doesn't have a lot of physical strength. So that's part of it as well. L, work to equalize the power differentials that may occur. Excellent, Jesse. Yes. Do you think it really creates and exacerbates? When we say power differentials, it means, one person is more capable and stronger than another person. And the fact that we are in recovery and we've gone through training and that we have a job, that automatically creates some power differential. So part of it is we work to equalize it. And when we're like, oh no, I'll just do all this stuff for you because there's no way you can do it for yourself. We just split it up some more. Excellent, Jesse. Stephanie, we got E, maintain high standards of personal conduct and conduct themselves in a manner that fosters their own recovery. Absolutely. That is really absolutely excellent because it's not fostering her own recovery. It's putting her own physical recovery at risk, and is setting her up like, I'm needed, and I'm successful when I do for. We don't do for ever, ever, ever. We got an L, work to equalize the power to, yeah, we got that one. And A, seek to role model recovery. Absolutely. We want to role model that recovery where that person is, we're showing that we can say no. That's part of recovery, right? Is setting those boundaries that take care of ourselves. We can absolutely do that. But that is not something that Sally is doing right now. Some other things that I have here, possibly G, which is it's discriminating on the basis of physical disability. You can't. I'm defining you by you can't. Because I will tell you, having worked with people with physical limitations similar to this, is that a lot of us, I mean, we are very familiar, most of us, with the stigma that comes with mental health challenges, but we're not always as familiar with some of the stigma that comes with certain physical challenges. And one of the things that we will automatically assume is we see somebody in a wheelchair and say, oh, they can't. That can't can be followed by a lot of different things, but I can guarantee, unless you work with somebody like that, that you are over assuming what that person cannot do. And we need to be aware of that, and that is automatically discrimination. We talk sometimes about able-bodied people, but there's also able-minded, and when it comes to mental health, able-minded is like people think, oh, you just do this, and they just use a planner, and they'll say that to somebody with ADHD when those of us with ADHD know it's not quite that simple, right? Or just, stiff upper lip, be happy, and those of us with depression know that it's not that simple. And but able-bodied is either you can or you can't, and there's no in between. And and if you don't, then you just can't, and you just can't. And there's a lot of things after the can't. And I can tell you right now that there's a lot more things than somebody, even if they are in a wheelchair, there's a lot more things than they can do than a lot of people assume. And so that's really easy to do. That was an excellent catch right there. So excellent. So when it comes to all these things, so what damage is possible from the ethical violations in this scenario? And who can be damaged here? Sally, what kind of damage is possible? Yeah, she could get physically hurt. Excellent. Shauna and Mariah, it was a great team effort. I don't think you guys even knew that was perfect. Hurting herself or the peer. Yeah, because if she falls or drops the peer, oh my goodness, can you say lawsuit? Oh, that's not good. And the peer feels they can't do it. Absolutely. And sometimes, especially if this is a disability they've had since birth, they've been taught all their life they can't do it. Absolutely. So, it just reinforces, oh, I can't. Savior complex on the peer support part. Yes, that's something that comes a lot with able-bodied stuff, where I have to save the people that can't do around me, right? And dependency for the peer. Absolutely great answer, Stephanie. And Jane could be hurt by never figuring out how to do these things for herself. Exactly. Now, one thing I can guarantee is that this person has had this all their life. There's been probably providers, especially if they're already in peer support, that have tried to teach her some independence. So she may, but that requires other people not just being taught independence, but other people supporting the efforts towards independence. Because one of the things that most of us, when we're trying something new or something hard, it's really hard for other people around us, if they care about us, to let us struggle through it, because nobody is going to be good at something like that the first time. But the way I describe this is, we don't yell at toddlers. You get a baby, you get a toddler, they're just starting to learn to walk. They're a little unstable. They sit down fast a lot. They fall down a few times. We don't yell at them and get mad at them. We're like, yay, good job for every bit of effort and progress that you make, right? Even as adults, we have a lot of things that we're babies or toddlers at, things that we're new at, things that we are trying to get better at. And we need to not yell at ourselves and not make assumptions or yell at our peers when they're not good at it the first time either. So, and that can make it harder for them to figure out and build up the practice and the strength and the confidence to do it on their own. If Sally hurts herself, she'll not be able to help peers, so it reflects on the peer as well. Absolutely. That could make long-term damage there. Jane could also start expecting it and get hurt when Sally says she can't. Absolutely. So one of the factors here is that it is absolutely possible for Jane to lose a lot of muscle strength. Let's say that Jane has a transfer board. That takes a lot of upper body strength to move herself from her chair into the car. And in which case, if she doesn't have to do that, she's going to lose that muscle strength. And then Sally and Cindy, I love this. Sally feels she can't let Jane down, so there's stress on her. Do you think she feels emotionally responsible for Jane in areas where it is not her responsibility? Which brings us perfectly to the next one. What types of boundaries, that internal, yeah, Jane's going to lose money. Absolutely, Angie. So what internal, external, physical, and I know that there's internal and external. I just want you to label those, but tell me specifically what types of boundaries, like what internal boundaries would be good for Sally to set, what external boundaries would be good for Sally to set, what personal boundaries would be good for her to set. Well, okay, Shauna, that's a very good question. Shauna asked, would it be appropriate to ask a family member or neighbor for help lifting the wheelchair? What say you for the, and Samantha says, empower the peer. So one of the things we encourage is self-advocacy, somebody speaking up for themselves. So what might be an appropriate way to deal with this? What might be a way to empower the peer? There's two angles we could do that. Do with, not for. We support. We do not do for. Absolutely, Samantha. Excellent. Encourage and empower them to reach out to natural supports like family, friends. A lot of times there may be a caregiver as well, or rehab staff. Encourage her to be able to do it. Now, one of the things that gets kind of tricky here is we can set boundaries, and that's an automatic encouragement. We got to be very careful if we give suggestions, and it's just like what I would do here. Okay, so one thing is some things we got to remember that this is a disability, and I'm going to say it's been around for a while. So it's almost guaranteed that Jane knows a lot of the other resources available to her right now. And Shauna, we want to stay off the sofa, so no suggestions. So what do we use as part of, let's go to motivational interviewing. Hopefully you guys have learned a little bit about that. What is something we could use to help the peer find solutions for themselves? Because remember, there's physical help that we're doing, but if we tell them the solutions, that's still doing for. It's not just the physical doing for that needs to stop. It's not just the physical doing for that needs boundaries. It's also the intellectual and emotional doing for. Does that make sense? So what are some things that we can do that, Chris, this is like, I would ask the peer how they usually manage these situations and support that solution. Excellent. Those open-ended questions that respects them, says they've been here before. We're not the only person in lives. We see them 2 hours a week, right? And, we haven't, even if we've been with them a few years, they've had this a lot longer than we've seen them, most likely. And support that solution, support that person, your peer, doing that solution. Yeah, how has she done that before, Mariah? Excellent. What works best for her? Support her through however she knows how to do it by herself. Excellent. Getting through a bunch of these. Interview beforehand. That can sometimes be helpful to help us set boundaries and what our supports are. So I really like the open-ended questions. It gives more power to the peer, because interviewing beforehand and then we know where to look, that's us knowing how to look, where to look. But even if we do that in the beforehand, we should never take over with the solutions. We should never, we can, and if I always try to open-ended questions are your absolute friend with boundaries. How do you do this? What do you usually do? What have you done in the past? And because sometimes even if we interview them in the beginning, that doesn't mean that they want to or it's easy for them to do it. And Mariah, my question, yes, it is motivational interviewing. When we use open-ended questions and are reflective and honor those, that's very much, and it's very, very good. Internal emotional for Sally, because she has convinced herself, this is Stephanie's, that she is the one to do for Jane. Absolutely. She needs to set that internal boundary, that internal emotional boundary, that she is responsible for that, because she is not, correct? And that makes it harder for her to set the physical boundaries when she feels she has that poor emotional boundary. So setting that internal emotional boundary will help her to do that. And using our own stories, excellent, Stephanie. We can absolutely, if the peer comes back with discouragement and stating of barriers, we can use some of our own lived experience strategically to give them stories that help them know, oh, maybe it is possible for me to do something. And yes, Sam, this is an excellent boundary. And this is something I will do at the beginning in my very first appointment, even if I don't see any physical disabilities. Let them know I can't do anything that has to do with helping them physically. And I will even say, I never do for. And that includes not just physical. I'm not going to give them solutions. I'm not there to teach them things. I am not there to connect them to things. I am there to support them while they do things. And they can bounce ideas off me and stuff like this, but I am not there, not just to help them physically, but I am not going to be the one that thinks through a problem for them. I am not going to be the one that gives them solutions, because that's part of the barrier, right? So she can't get around out in the community. Maybe we meet at home. Yeah. I would say it maybe a little bit differently, like, I say at the beginning, I can't help you physically, or I can stabilize the transfer board, and that's all I can do. And if it appears like, they've been manipulating, I shouldn't say it that way at all, but but if they've been putting themselves in a situation where they've lost a lot of muscle and they cannot physically do that, then at that point I would say, what would you like to do? Like, I want to go out. Well, do you feel like you can do that? Because I can't do more for you right now. And then it'd be like, and because sometimes you will work with peers that will push it and push it and push it, because they're so used to people bailing them out that they want to push you to that point. And that's when your personal boundaries have to be really, 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 really strong. Assist peer, do we assist or do we support? We support peer with finding alternative transportation with disability more suitable for transportation. I would say yes, but make sure that we are never doing for. And those are things that sometimes, when we say do with, sometimes it's like we're both working on it. No, it's like, hey, you know, I'm asking open-ended questions to help them know where to look, what resources are out there, where can they look, and sometimes being a little bit of a resource broker there if there's something that they don't know where to look. But that can be a careful dance to do. We can teach problem solving, pick, but absolutely. And I don't even teach problem solving because that's more of a CBRS thing, but I will walk them through PICBA with helping them, asking open-ended questions to help them identify the problem, identify their impact on the problem, which may be things that they've done or things that they can do or don't. That's where identifying where their power is, you know, brainstorming, cost benefit, action, all those things. But we do that through open-ended questions. We don't teach them necessarily the steps. That's more CBRS. And follow the company policy. Absolutely. Now, sometimes, unfortunately, you have to, your code of ethics applies no matter where you're working. If you have an office, an agency, that their policy encourages violating the code of ethics, code of ethics comes first. I'll just say that. Okay. And so SOFA, thank you, Chris. I'll remind you what the SOFA is. We stay off the SOFA, which is suggestions, opinions, feedback, or advice. We don't do that because, especially with mental health, but it applies to almost everything, a lot of that feeling of helplessness isn't just the physical helplessness. It's, I don't know where to look. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to find solutions. I feel so hopeless because even that level, and it feels so easy and harmless because it's just words, right? I already know this. It's just words, right? But it's still enabling our and disempowering your peer, because finding solutions, having an idea where to look, reaching out and connecting to resources, yes, that can be scary. That's why we emotionally support them. But when we give them solutions, oh, we've overstepped our bounds and we've taken away their power, because that's often a big gap, because people have told them what to do all the times. And yeah, let me put that here. SOFA, not soda. Soda is a totally different thing. Suggestions, opinions, feedback, advice. Okay, so it is in, if you go to the Q&A, it's under answered. If you can't see it, then let me know and I'll put it in the chat instead. So excellent. So what specific boundaries, I mean, we've talked about a lot of these already. What specific boundaries would be appropriate to set and enforce with letting, you know, asking those open-ended questions, letting her know that I can't help you, you know, this, and it might, and this is like with the agency that I worked at, the specific boundary I was told was the only thing I was allowed to do was stabilize the transfer board. I did not, and of course I could put the wheelchair in my car, but they made sure that I was physically capable of doing it and my car was capable of holding it, because of course the peer could not put the wheelchair in my car. But I had to be honest with my agency when it came to that. And everything else, I didn't push her wheelchair, which sometimes I'll take off a peer, and there's other situations here, but but the thing is, it's not, sometimes when we set boundaries, the other person doesn't like it because they're not used to that. But that doesn't mean it's not the right thing to do. And that's part of what we have to understand when we set boundaries, is just because somebody else is upset about it. But yes, Terry is a great thing. I can't help you, but where do you feel that you need the support you need to gain this, or where do you feel you can find the support you need to gain the strength that you have? And how can you honor that? And one of the things I will say is, I'm here to help you find your power, not take it away. What can you do in this situation? What resources do you have? What tools do you have? And sometimes peers hate those questions because it puts responsibility on them. But that's a lot what boundaries are. It's recognizing where the responsibility actually is. Excellent, excellent, Terry. That is excellent specific boundary. I can't help you with that, but I can support you. You know, what do you know? What do you usually use? What can you do? What resources do you have? Because it's not necessarily, if she's not strong enough, who can you talk to? Those open-ended questions. What can you do? How do you want to do this? And sometimes it means that they're not going to get to go where they want to go today because maybe they set poor boundaries the day before, didn't get enough sleep. So right now their physical strength is too weak. And in which case, if we made their goal our goal, oh, they really wanted to go to Walmart today. I'll just help them today. Don't make their goal your goal. It's like, that's okay. I'm not going to judge you for that because your goal isn't my goal. If you don't go to Walmart today, it's okay. I'm here to support you getting stronger towards your goals as you learn to build up the strengths and the skills and the resources to get there. Does that make sense? And that's a vote of confidence for your peer, even if it doesn't feel like it. Oh, but I wanted to do this and you're not helping me. I'm not here to help you. I'm here to support you so that you can do more on your own and find your own resources, right? So scenario number 3. So certified peer recovery coach Tim works with a peer, Penny, who frequently flirts with Tim and sometimes gives him small gifts or treats during their appointments. Tim isn't interested in Penny and knows the gifts are cheap, so he plays along rather than makes things awkward by asking her to stop. He would sometimes joke with Penny that if she advanced far enough in her recovery and didn't need services anymore, he might take her out sometime. So what code of ethics are being violated in this scenario? HHHO, that was facts, Sam. Never engage in sexual or intimate activities with colleagues or those they serve. This is great because it's not like he was serious about it or would do it, but sometimes that's emotionally intimate to lead somebody on like that, right? Shauna is like I and J, so not accept gifts of significant value, which, I mean, Tim is like, it's not significant value, but sometimes it can be significant emotional value, and that can lead to other kinds of things as well. And then J, not enter into dual relationships, even if it's the perception of a dual relationship. We are can be in big trouble there. L, work to equalize the power differentials. Nature, that is really good there. Good catch, because is that a power differential? Holy cow, yes, because he has power in this situation. She is showing interest in him, and he knows he has the power in the situation. He can do whatever. And, I'm going to encourage her to get better by promising things that I'm not going to, oh yeah, total power problem there. And Cynthia caught that one as well. Getting rid of the duplicates here. We got HIJ. We got all of those. Never sleep with your kind, right? And that hasn't happened here, but just the promise that may happen in the future, can be emotionally intimate as well. And keep current with emerging knowledge relevant to recovery. Openly share that knowledge. Terry, I'm not sure exactly. The only thing I can think of that might apply here is that's not appropriate. That won't help you on your recovery, and I know that. And to share that with Penny, and it's not new, but it is valuable in this situation. So we have B, respect the rights and dignity of the. Oh, absolutely, that is not respectful or dignified to lead somebody along like that. Absolutely, you guys are doing, oh, Terry, yeah. I was like, N doesn't make sense. Excellent. I meant to put H. Yeah, H, we've had a lot of H's. So A, seek to role model recovery. Yeah, when we are in strong recovery, are we disrespecting people and leaving a lot. I mean, we see a lot of people that don't technically aren't diagnosed with a mental illness, and this is one of the reasons mental health is health. Just because somebody doesn't have symptoms to the point that they can have a mental health diagnosis doesn't mean that everything they do is healthy, right? When people lead people along, that is not healthy and that's not good recovery and can be a maladaptive coping skill.
Everyone, I can see that oh no. I can see that Dyany has left she was frozen and she's left, and we'll just wait for her to come back on, okay? So just give it a minute, and I'm sure she's logged out and she's logging back on.
I guess we could use this as a bathroom break, right, Mary?
That's right. Just make it quick, because I know she'll be pretty quick, because she'll be like, oh no. So have a little patience here. I know she's coming back on.
Sweet.
She's coming back on right now, so it should just be a couple minutes, everyone.
My computer completely locked up.
It's all good. It's all good. We're all waiting on you.
Okay. Well, the PowerPoint, I mean, my whole computer just died. Not a good sign. Where was that?
It's okay. You do what you have to do, Dyany.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, we're back. Okay, are we back? Are we here? Sorry about that, everyone. My computer decided to just up and die. So where were we? Yeah, I know that RC recovery coaches have a different code of ethics, but usually there's a lot of crossover. From what I could see with the different code of ethics that I looked at. But thank you for that, Stephanie and Sam. Yeah, I saw that my computer completely died, and I apologize. So what damage is possible from the ethical violations in this scenario? I think we did a really good job of going over all these different things that were there. So what kind of damage is possible from the ethical violations of the scenario? Legal liability, such as sexual harassment suspicion. Absolutely, Lucia. You can lead to all sorts of things. Tim could lose his job. Absolutely. Trust issues, self-worth, legal actions. Absolutely. Penny may have some serious insecurities. We don't know what symptoms she has. She's in a substance use recovery situation with a recovery coach, and we don't know how some of the things that have led to her substance use are affected here. And that can lead to trust issues with herself, issues of self-worth, trust issues with not just Tim, but all providers. There's all sorts of things that can lead to right there. Excellent, Cherie. Loses license. Absolutely. When we violate our code of ethics, we can lose our license and never be able to work in the field again. Emotional damage to Penny. Yes, Rebecca. Definitely emotional damage. I mean, we know how much it hurts even in a regular scenario, but when we're working with somebody professionally and, you know, there's that automatic feeling of power and respect, it could set Penny's recovery back. Absolutely, Stephanie. Set it seriously back. And, you know, substance use and as well as emotional. Stephanie, emotional damage that Tim could cause Penny with the hope of a relationship. It doesn't even have to be an actual, oh, I'm never going to do anything. It doesn't have to be like that. Just that, oh, yeah, I could have that someday. Then it could be devastating. Cindy, to give her hope, and then the thought that she advances, they might go out. Yeah, and that's, I don't know. I know with peer support, there's not in writing a specific period of time that we are not allowed to contact, but generally you go with the agency. So it's usually or at least 2 years before you can engage with somebody outside of in other ways. And so it's just, and so even then, just saying, you know, when you don't need services anymore, we can go out. That's usually not even ethical by itself. So it's, you know, on top of he's not interested in her. He doesn't care, right? So what types of boundaries would help Tim avoid the ethical violations? And like specifics, as we did before. One of the things I look at is like, why is he doing this? What it's in there. He plays along rather than make things awkward. So we're looking for the types of boundaries this time. So it could be considered bribery, like unwarranted things like, if you get better, then we can go out. Yeah. And I don't know if that has the technical term of bribery, but it falls along that emotional, it's like emotional bribery. Good one, Shauna. Explain the peer-to-peer roles and boundaries. Absolutely. Including saying, you know, this isn't a possibility and just laying that down. He doesn't have to make it personal. I'm not interested in you. He doesn't have to say that. He also doesn't say, I would, but if only, because that's misleading. He doesn't have to bring that in. Just explain the peer-to-peer roles and boundaries. Excellent, Stephanie. No emotional responsibility to help her avoid negative feelings or make her feel desirable. Exactly. He needs to set that internal emotional boundary to avoid feeling responsible. I don't want to make this awkward. I don't want her to feel negative. I don't want her to feel rejected. I want her to be able to feel like she is desirable. It's not his responsibility. Excellent, Lucia. That's very, very good. Yeah, Cameron, there's a confusion what a healthy social relationship should be. So what are some of the boundaries that might help in that situation? Nature, the first indication of dual relationship forming. Yeah. Tim needs to set the boundary of being personal versus natural support. Oh, excellent, excellent. Yeah, we are professional supports. Basically, the way we teach this is professional supports. And this, you know, you can probably find a better way to word this. Professional supports are paid to be there. Natural supports are not. And we're paid to be there, right? So, and so we cannot be there in those other ways because we have a code of ethics to live up to. So what are some, you know, being open and honest with your role, Angie? Yes, excellent. This is my role, you know, and I can care about you, but you know, we can't have relationships outside of this is what my role is. Excellent, excellent. And Cherie says, I found that being upfront and honest about the situation helps. Yes, we want to be honest because that builds trust and rapport. It alleviates awkwardness, validates trust, and sometimes even respect. All of us here as peer providers, we're in our own recovery journeys. And that does not mean that we're going to be perfect at everything. We can feel very awkward. We may have challenges and barriers when it comes to being honest, and because sometimes we're people pleasers. Sometimes our anxiety response, for instance, is a fawn response, where we want to please the person and not make it ruffle any feathers, and that can make boundaries very challenging. And as such, but if we can practice, sometimes we have to practice role model, and sometimes you can talk to supervisors about this. This is really hard for me. I don't want her to feel bad. Well, let's practice it then. Let's practice blaming the agency, blaming the code of ethics. That's all. Okay. And Stephanie also brought up, excellent, excellent. He may need to talk with a supervisor and switch peer support for her. If she is really, really, oh no, I really, you know, if I don't have you as peer support, then can we go out and stuff like this? Or anything like that. Or if she seems to have struggles with it, absolutely. Because it's not just, the problem isn't just Tim's action. She's being inappropriate in many ways. But if her feelings are really strong, that may not be a very therapeutic relationship, because even if he doesn't lead her on, that can cause problems. So talking to the supervisor, explain the situation, and then hopefully it will, you know, we'll switch peer providers. Sam, it says, I always address inappropriate behavior or behavior that makes me feel uncomfortable when it happens, not letting anything go. Absolutely. Address it with yourself, but also when it comes to peer stuff, with your supervisor, because we are here. Does that help our own recovery if we put ourselves in this awkward situation where we feel kind of pressured to, you know, oh man, I don't how do I avoid it today? And all sorts of things like that. That's hard on our recovery. If that specific area we still struggle in our recovery, we don't have to be there. Part of the boundaries can be saying no to working with certain peers, and that's okay. That's part of the way that the peer support works, the peer providers. Yeah, and Shauna, emotional damage can also increase if the relationship doesn't work. And Sam, document. Absolutely. You want to document like collaboration with your supervisor. You want to document, you know, talking things over, and, you know, absolutely. And if it's strong enough, you definitely want to talk to your supervisor. I don't think I can work with her. She has feelings for me. And it's just, I feel like that will be a barrier to her recovery, and that's okay. That's okay. And, so, there's a lot of specific boundaries, that we just talked about that are appropriate to set and enforce. That there's just so many different things, because it's the kind of thing that the original situation was not Tim's choice. How he dealt with it was, and that's part of the thing. And we're going to sometimes be put into awkward situations, and that's okay, as long as we recognize, you know, areas where we're weak. Like if, I have a hard time saying no to this kind of thing, or just like a solid no, I can maybe dither around. Well, maybe in a different situation, or other things, which isn't appropriate, but sometimes that's the kind of way we've always dealt with that, because we've been taught, especially like sometimes women especially are sometimes taught, don't say no, that's rude and mean. And so we dither around it rather than a cold, no, I can't do that. Right. And so this is the kind of thing that may require some practice and may require talking to your supervisor. That's okay. But we do need to be aware that we can make the situation worse sometimes through things that and sometimes that helps us in our own recovery, because it makes us examine the way we behave in our outside of work life, right? And that's one of the things. Boundaries always will help, and even outside of work. And so scenario number 4. So Sally knows a woman named I am not looking at the family support code right now. What I have printed out is the peer support code. But yes, if you pull up the link, the family support code of ethics is right under the peer support code of ethics. So you guys can look at all of those things. Okay. But I'm only looking at peer support. So if you bring up letters with family support, I can't follow you very well. Thank you, Stephanie, for pointing that out. But so the scenario is peer support. Sally knows a woman named Barbara from church who has been struggling from symptoms of anxiety and depression. Sally shares some of her lived experience, because remember, it's we advocate for recovery, and that doesn't mean we just have to talk about this at work, right? So she shares some of her lived experience with Barbara and tells her about her role. Barbara seems encouraged by this, and a couple of weeks later, Sally is surprised when her supervisor gives Barbara to her as a new peer. Sally needed another peer. She needs more of that income, right? And feels like she might have someone led Barbara to see, this is my fault. I led her along to seek out me as a provider. Lucy is right on that dual relationship, so she feels obligated to help her and accept the assignment. So yes, that's a potential dual relationship. You got the church stuff, and you got the peer stuff. Oh yeah, that's going to be a challenge there. You got potentially E, maintain high standards of personal conduct and conduct themselves in a manner that fosters. Yeah, I would personally feel that would make my own recovery kind of hard sometimes if I'm seeing them in in a personal venue and a work venue. Absolutely. And dual relationship, yes, Sally should have let her supervisor know up front. Excellent. You're jumping right to the boundaries that can be set. It doesn't matter if she feels responsible. Let the supervisor know. Feeling responsible is separate from what you do next, right? Excellent. You guys are all over this. You guys are getting this really down well. Privacy is also an issue. Absolutely. This could be, we want to maintain confidentiality, and that can make some things challenging when we know somebody in different things or different venues. Respect the rights and dignities of those they serve. Yes. Because there's always a potential with any violated boundaries that we're not, like, for instance, Sally feels maybe she led Barbara to seek me out did she say that? We're going to assume that she didn't, because it wasn't in the scenario. And so, so she's taking responsibility and making assumptions as to why she was given this person as a peer. And then she's taking responsibility. Oh, I need to take it because it's my fault. And that is not respecting the rights or dignity of Barbara, because it's making assumptions and it's taking away her power. And Sheree, yes, tell the supervisor you know them personally, and should run in with Barbara, you know about the dual relationship. So yeah, if you let the supervisor know, hopefully the supervisor will be able to reassign Barbara, and we'll explain it, so we don't necessarily need to do that. But if you run into her personally, she might say, oh, I'm really sorry, maybe, and you could say, it's nothing personal, it's just part of my code of ethics. Because one of the things about saying no that makes, I love this, a tip for saying no is blame the code of ethics, blame your agency, because those rules are there for a reason. And even if people don't agree with them, say, sorry, I can lose my license if I do this. And it's that simple. Simple doesn't mean easy. Simple can sometimes mean we still have to practice it because we still get, because we still have those feelings, right? But we can still practice it and attend classes that help us find ways of dealing with it, right? So what damage, so we talked about some of the damage of, privacy and things like this, but what other kinds of damage can be possible from the ethical violations in this scenario? Anyone? Would it be possible for Sally to have problems with strategic sharing with Barbara because she knows her in multiple venues and she knows that Barbara talks to people that Sally also knows personally? It is great. Yes, Cindy, it is great that Barbara seemed encouraged and let her know that it's best that she stays within a relationship that she has with her. Excellent. That's an excellent approach. Be positive about it. Oh, I'm really glad you felt encouraged with this. This code of ethics is here, and we can still say friends, and we can still do this other stuff. But it's probably best that I'm not actually your provider here. It can damage their natural support network if either feels nervous about attending church afterwards. Absolutely. That can be a huge thing there. I mean, just by the fact they interacted at church says that that's a natural support network for both of them. Excellent, Lucia. And peer feel rejected from someone she knows personally and might trust. Well, that's a possibility. But I assume you mean like if we say no, or if we had to say no later, that is a possibility as well. But it's better to say, one of the things about that's good about boundaries is early and often. We set the boundaries early as we can, but sometimes we don't have that opportunity. Like in this situation, we didn't know it was going to be a thing. So, but yeah, always be transparent about your past history and then include client and the peer in the decision, especially in a small town. Absolutely need. Now, this is one of those situations. Dual relationships is really tricky in really small towns. You may be the only peer provider in your town, but you may also be the only CPRS provider in your town. Is that going to produce problems? Yes. And that is why we have 3 scopes when it comes to staying in your lane. And one of them is the scope of the current role. So that if you're in a really small town and you're the only provider of those services, so that they really can't have things, then you absolutely keep them separate and you keep it very, very clear to the peer. When we're in peer support time, I am only peer support, and here's my role, and here's what I can and cannot do. When we are in CBRS time, here's my role, here's what I can and cannot do. Never mix them up. And it can ruin the friendship. Absolutely. That's another, Joy, that's an excellent option for an example of the damage that's possible from the ethical violations here. There's all kinds of things. For instance, in our peer role, we had to say no to some things that we might say yes to as a friend. And you're going to have a really muddy situation there with this. So, so what are some of the, let's start, what are some internal boundaries that might help Sally avoid some of the decisions, the ethical violation decisions here? Let's start with internal. Yeah, identify her personal recovery goals and commit to ethics and boundaries. Excellent, Devin. Internally knowing your own professional limits. You know the code of ethics. You know this isn't okay. You know about what dual relationships are, etc. Making up in your mind in the beginning you won't support someone you already know. Exactly. That's dual relationship. I mean, every year we and when we start, we absolutely state we're going to keep the code of ethics, and that includes dual relationships, and that's part of making up your mind on that one, Sam. Yep. And we want to feel good about the fact that Barbara got help. Yeah. We don't want to feel responsible for being the help necessarily, but we're glad that Barbara reached out for help. Excellent, Stephanie. That's a good one too. So one of the things. So yeah, there's just a lot of things there. So yeah, and you can explain why you can't be your peer support. That's a good physical boundary. You can explain it. That's something that you do. Yeah, because we start with the internal because we want that emotional. Because part of what got her here is she needs the money, and that's making decisions for her own benefit, which isn't okay in peer support. And then the B, she felt responsible, so obviously it's my fault. She probably asked for me, which we don't know. And if she did, it's my fault. And so I have to, I made my bed, I have to sleep in it. And that's not how it works, right? That doesn't have any effect on the ethics. Excellent. You guys are really good at this. So some other tips with boundaries that we got here. I've said this before, but avoid letting your peer's goal become your goal. Your goal is to support your peer in working towards their goal. You support them. Devin, be open and honest with Barbara about the code of ethics, and would rather just be your church friend and support Barbara as a church. Yeah, and even then, you don't want to muddy and say, well, and go into peer. I don't know about you guys ever do this, but sometimes I go into peer mode with friends and family if they are presenting me a situation that might be a peer type situation. And I have to remind myself, I don't want to do that most of the time, even though boundaries is always good and knowing resources is good. But it can sometimes make things muddy, especially if they are receiving that service from somebody else. So on to this, we want to avoid letting your peer's goal become your goal. Your goal is to support your peer in working toward their goal, not their goal. You are supporting the peer, not their goal. And taking their goal on ourselves, which is if we take that on, can make it harder to keep boundaries that allow the peer to gain skills and resources to move into recovery. It also makes it harder. Sometimes if we feel frustrated with a peer, we feel frustrated because they're not getting closer to their goal. That means we're not supporting them. We want them to meet their goal. Does that make sense? And honestly, a lot of times other people can feel that when we are there for the goal and not for them. And one of the strengths of peer support is that we are there for them. And so if you show up and they said they had a goal to go to Walmart, but they are not ready and they cannot get ready and there isn't the time to do it because of their choices, if we emotionally let go of that goal, and it's like, then it's easier for us to not only show support for the peer, but show it sincerely. I understand the stuff, tell me what happened that got in the way this time, and they're like, well, I slept until like right before you got here and I wasn't ready at all. I'm like, okay, that's fine. It doesn't affect how, me coming here. We can still do things. But you really want to go to Walmart? Yeah, I really wanted to go today. And are you sure we can't, add an hour to our appointment time so that we can go? And I'm like, yeah, I can't add an hour to our appointment time. But I know that you can what would you like to do? What do you think you could do next time? and maybe we could do this next time, because then it's easier for us to be sincere in our regard for our peers if we don't get frustrated or upset with the goals not being met. Does that make sense? Do you think that that would make it easier? So avoid letting your peers' goal become your goal. And then you have to sometimes ask ourselves, are we seeing the peers' barriers or limitations, or are we seeing their strengths? And when we say strengths, it's almost misleading. Strengths are things that they can do that can help move them closer to the goals. They may not be really good at them yet, in which case it's easy to say, well, that's not a strength. And a lot of times we'll hear from our peer, that's not a strength. But if it's something that they can do, that can move them closer to the goal, even if they're not good at it yet, we can support them in building the strength, which is part of our role, until it is strong enough that they can move forward with it. If you are looking for ways to help and fix things, not even necessarily physically, this is one of the things I see a lot, which is, well, I didn't do it for them. I just told them what to do, told them what the resources were, said, how can you do this? You need to do this, and da 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 da. Or they asked me, and so I told them how to do it. We're not strength focused because we're not focused on what they can do. Because I can guarantee, even if we have peers with serious developmental or intellectual disabilities, there are things that they can do. And there are resources that they have that can fill in the gaps, that they can self-advocate for, okay? And we're not strengths focused if we think we need to fill in any of those gaps, whether it's teaching them things, giving them ideas, suggestions, opinions, feedback, advice. We want to stay off that sofa. We want to focus on what the peer can do. That is strengths focused. And that is a core part of recovery. Even if what they can do right now seems tiny, even if they say that doesn't count, I can't tell you how many times in my own recovery, there were things that I could do, but I said, that doesn't count. It doesn't matter. It's too small. It's dumb. And I feel stupid and it's worthless. And so I would give up on even those little things. And that would set my recovery back. I mean, I have to say right now, my hand is taped because I have some severe tendonitis. And I'm really good at hurting myself. And with physical therapy, when you're in physical therapy, you do these dumb little things like put your thumb out and put your thumb back and put your thumb out and put your thumb back and do this a set of 10 3 times a day. And it's like, oh my gosh, that is so dumb and small and useless. And it's really easy to say that's too small and it's not going to help. But doing that little thing is a strength that, if repeated, will be built upon and will add to our resilience and our recovery. Okay? We want to find hope in that. We want to support that, their efforts, their intentions, all of those things. Your hope, which you show by not swooping in and trying to fix things for them, even ideas, your hope and focus can help your peer feel more capable and safer as they move in a positive direction. Okay? Once they feel safe existing with you there, because you aren't there for their goals, you are there for them, it's easier to feel safer moving forward in a positive direction, taking more responsibility. And come on, there we go. Good boundaries focus on what is, not what should be. Okay? If we allow our perception to be tainted by what we think a body should do, my thumb should be able to go much farther out, and this is dumb. What a peer can do, what their family or natural supports to do, what the system can do, what we can do or should be doing, we will either become frustrated or try to fill in missing gaps by letting boundaries slip. there's so many shoulds. Shoulds, I mean, one of the things probably a lot of us have heard is don't should on yourselves. It does not help with recovery. It's not about what should. What is, and that's good. Move forward. If we can be okay with what is, then we can move forward. I just saw a hand. You put something in the question and answer, then I'll address it. So yeah, good boundaries focus on what is. It focuses, we understand where we stop and the other person begins, and also things that are out of our control. Cameron says, I remind myself I am still working on my recovery. Absolutely. Recovery is a journey, and crossing boundaries is a step back for me. There's not one, but two items in the Code of Ethics, the Pearsport Code of Ethics, item A and item E, that if we aren't fostering our own recovery, we're violating our Code of Ethics. And sometimes we try to excuse that by, this is just a little thing. But we also need to remember that if that peer is not getting stronger in making their own decisions and in finding it, if we're not supporting them as they build their strengths, their skills, their resources, then we're also failing on that front. And we need to remember that saying no is a powerful, powerful tool. No, good no's power good yeses. That's basically what it is. If we say yes to everything, everything falls apart. But if we have enough no's, it keeps the power where it needs to be. Now, we have a few minutes left for questions and answers, or specific or broad. Shoot them at me in the Q&A. Thank you, Sam. What else we got? I know you guys want to get out early, but if you want 2 whole hour credits to CEUs. I love your term resource broker. Yeah, that's an official term. Can you, so a resource broker in peer support means, I mean, it's like when you think about a real estate broker, they don't sell the house, they don't buy the house, they connect, they inform people about houses and connections and make things a little bit easier, right? So as a resource broker, the way I usually do that with good boundaries is I don't say, here's a resource. I'll say, what do you think you can do to do this? And if the person, sometimes where they are at the recovery, they just lock up. I have no idea. Then I might say, do it a little bit more now. Where do you think you can look? 211, or Department of Health and Welfare, or call Medicaid, or talk to case manager. Where do you think you can look? And if they still are locked up, I might give them resources that are broader. Like, I think that, or I might make a referral, but a resource broker does not fill out things. It doesn't give them solutions. Sometimes I'll do it through sharing my lived experience, but a lot of times it's through asking those questions that help them go in a direction. It's like, oh, and so then there's these resources, like, and I can support them a lot, sometimes while they reach out to the resources, while they explore the resources, other things like that. So yeah, resource broker is like an official term I didn't make up, but it's really valuable in peer support. Mariah asked, what if you have a peer who needs to do a job application, wants you to do it with them? You don't do it for them, but you can be there with them. Yeah, be there with them, totally. And sometimes they'll be like, what does this mean? Because sometimes they are very scared and their brain locks up. Absolutely be there with them. And that's one of the differences. One of the things I tell my peers, if you need help filling it out, you go to a case manager. If you just want emotional support, but you are capable of more doing it on your own, I am totally up for that. I'll support you all day long. Well, for the 2 hours I'm there anyway. So yeah, that's a really good question, Mariah. Yeah, totally be there with them. You can accompany them while they find jobs to apply for. Yes, like I said, with the case manager, yeah, if you are not taxi, like they really are scared about it and they need that emotional support. Yeah, you're promoting their independence. You're not there just as a ride. If they tell you to wait in the car, because sometimes you will work with peers that'll say, oh yeah, I need your emotional support. And you get there and like, can you wait in the car? They didn't need your emotional support. So that's something to, that may be a boundary that needs to be set, but that accompanying them as long as it's part of their goals and you aren't doing for, and you're not just giving them a ride. Absolutely. How'd you handle the boundary of who initiates the appointments? If a peer has a mental illness that makes consistency difficult, like they have barriers and goes through periods of not responding. So I would say it is not, but you do need to have certain policies. And I was, Lucia, I would say, might say something like, you seem to be, there seems to be some struggles with this. Do you still want peer support? Would be the first question I'd ask. And they would say, yes, I still want to do it. And it's like, okay, I have these, a lot of times the agency will say like a 3 cancel or no show policy that you have to discharge them after that. And then let them know that policy. It's again, make the agency the bad guy on that. But I would also ask them, what seems to be getting in the way and what resources or skills do you have that might make this easier for you to attend our appointments? And then if we do have to discharge them, what I tell the peer is not like, you did this to yourself where I'm dumping you. It's like, I'm sorry that this isn't working for you right now. When you get to the point, because it could, often if it's like that, they don't have the skills, which may be a CBRS or case management thing. In which case, it's like, when you feel like you are in a better place in your recovery for peer support, reach out again. And that's the way I usually set that with that kind of situation, because that does come up. Okay, so if I said CPRS, there was CPRC. That's a certified peer recovery coach. And a peer recovery coach is a recovery coach that works with people with substance use disorders. And the peer part means that they have experienced substance use disorder themselves. And a certified peer support specialist focuses on mental health, though it can include co-occurring disorders, which is mental health plus substance use disorder. But we focus on the mental health side. But thanks, Sam, for also looking at that. And CBRS is community-based rehabilitation services. And what they do is they teach, and that can be teaching coping skills. It could be teaching budgeting. It could be teaching. It's basically helping a person, their skill building with the peer. If you meant CBRS. Yeah. Okay. So, okay. Yeah. Well, we covered both. So, yeah, so that's what that is. Because when I started, I didn't know what all these were. They weren't in my training. This is something we include in our training. But CBRS is like part of being a resource broker, but also part of being part of an agency is making referrals to, if the peer says, I can't do this even with support, I'm having trouble with housing, I'm having trouble with, whatever, then you can refer them to case manager as a role. If they're like, I'm really struggling with my coping skills, you can refer them to CBRS, or they're having trouble with skills in their home, budgeting or cooking, or just various things. You can refer them to CBRS. That's a skill building kind of thing. So anything else we got there? Any other questions? Thank you, Sam. I do have a lot of passion for this. My boundaries weren't terribly strong when I started. And recognizing the importance of them and having the good feedback of seeing how it helped my own wellness and it helped the wellness of my peers really fed a passion for it. Yeah, family support partners are a little bit different, and so they also may do some teaching, but you need to, and Optum is in charge. You need to but DHW is usually who sets the ethics on that, and you'll have to look at Magellan now for other well, very soon for their guidance on that. Anything else? You guys have been a great class. Let me get to my. So, if you, March 2020, there's so many things in the works for the move over. I'm like, yeah, I'm just treating it like it's there, but it's still technically Optum. Thank you. Thank you. I think that we are good. I'm going to turn time back over to Mary.
Thanks, Dyany. What an informative presentation, and really great job when your computer shut down and you got the black screen. Okay, so here's a reminder. Check either your reminder email for your full CEU requirements. I sent it to you yesterday. And you will find your evaluation email in your inbox within an hour or so. And you need to complete that within 48 hours of the session because the survey will close at 3 o'clock on Saturday. At noon on Saturday. And you do have the option to redo, and you can see if your answers are right or not in those 3 content specific questions. So I will send you an email probably tomorrow, maybe this afternoon, with the links from the session and a link to the slides so you can refer to those. And any direct questions, use the EI Empower Idaho email, which I'm going to put both Dyany's email in the chat, and I will also put Empower Idaho's. Let me do that. And the slides and the recording will be available on the website in a few days. And thank you everyone for attending. And once again, thank you, Dyany. Great session. Have a great day, everyone. Nice.